Here are 10 players that you and I cannot stop drafting. We're going to get it kicked off with Tyreek Hill, who is one of my favorite players to draft right now. Going off the board, 29.0 overall ADP, mid-third round pick. With Tyreek Hill, you had a guy 2 years ago who was, well, last year, he was a top 3 fantasy pick for a reason. 2 years ago, he was the number 2 wide receiver in terms of win rate behind CeeDee Lamb, posting over 25 points per game. And that first 1 to 12 weeks of the year, he was as dominant of a fantasy asset as you can possibly be. Let me ask you this, Danny. What changed with Tyreek Hill? Why are people suddenly off of him? I'll let you make kind of a bear case on him because I'm obviously going to speak very bullishly on him.
So for what it's worth, I'm just playing devil's advocate. I also cannot stop drafting Tyreek Hill at that 2-3 turn. However, those that are maybe not drafting Tyreek Hill, maybe going towards younger wide receivers in that range, if we do look over on ADP right now, guys going in that late 2, early 3 area, maybe ahead of Tyreek Hill, somebody may prefer the youth element of, for example, T. Higgins, wide receiver, 5 points per game last year. Rashee Rice, before he got hurt, was Mahomes' wide receiver 1 and had a 99th percentile perception score against zone coverage. Marvin Harrison Jr., you're betting on the fabled prospect that he was potentially developing in tier 2. Like, I understand from a youth perspective why these guys are going ahead of Hill. On top of that, with Tyreek Hill himself, not the season that you want to see in 2024, battling that wrist injury, obviously Tua missing some time, and even when Tua was on the field, quite frankly, Tyreek Hill not looking like himself. But to be honest, when I'm looking at the case for Tyreek Hill, let me ask you this question. Do you think Mike McDaniel, given the personnel that they have on this team, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Devon Achane, Tua Tagovailoa, a bad offensive line in general, do you think he's going to want to consistently run the football between the tackles in an inefficient way like he did last year? Or if his wide receivers are healthy and quarterback is healthy, wanting to air it out like he did in 2023? For me, 2023 case is much more likely.
Yeah, no, especially when you factor in that 2023 season, they had one of the best young safeties in the league, Javon Holland, who's no longer there. They had Jalen Ramsey playing at a high level, who sounds like he's going to be moved at some point. They also had a better pass rush than what they currently have. Like, this is going to be a bad defense, man. Like, the Dolphins scheme, Mike McDaniel, we are a year removed from saying how much of a genius he was. And I saw articles last year that pointed to, a play action play in the Dolphins offense or a jet motion play in the Dolphins offense results in 1.7x the fantasy points than the average NFL offense. Like, he was scheming things up so well. And I'm kind of just willing to flush the toilet on the Miami Dolphins season last year. Between Tyreek and Waddle being banged up, Tua's injuries, everything went wrong for the Miami Dolphins last year. This is truly one of the best fantasy football wide receivers of the last generation. Realistically, you have a healthy quarterback, probably a bad defense like we just made reference to, still with a great offensive architect and other talented players on the offense who all excel in the passing game, whether it is Tyreek Hill, Waddle, obviously Tua talking about getting the ball out quicker than he already has been. Devon Achane led all running backs in targets last year. To me, I'd just rather draft Tyreek Hill than the names that you listed. T. Higgins couldn't stay healthy until last year. Everybody remember that? Marvin Harrison, not even certain if he's a good NFL receiver at this point in time. Rashee Rice, yeah, he was great with Mahomes. That was a 2.5 game sample size. To me, the bet is the same on Tyreek as it is with all of these players. You're undergoing some form of risk. With Tyreek, it's age and, the injury, but it was a wrist injury. It's not predictive. It's not going to linger. He's already catching passes in OTAs. This is a former fantasy superstar that needs to stay healthy, which to me is no different than Christian McCaffrey going at the end of the first round. And Tyreek Hill at the end of at the beginning of the third round, when I already have 2 players on my team. Let's say I draft Jamar Chase and I draft Josh Jacobs with my first 2 picks or something, and I can grab Tyreek Hill as my third player. That is way less risk to me than taking Christian McCaffrey with your first pick.
And maybe some are worried, like, oh, well, it's a 31 going on 32-year-old wide receiver. Obviously, he is so reliant upon his speed. Well, I mean, he just ran, a 10-1-5 in a 100-meter race. Like, I sent it to our group chat this morning. Like, speed is not the concern you should have for Tyreek Hill at this point. Maybe he's a little bit of a knucklehead because he's hanging out with Aiden Ross. I know Ron's brought that up a couple times. But if that's the concern that we have, instead of like, oh, he's physically falling off as a player, again, I think reception perception also will be pretty indicative on Tyreek Hill. Like, if Harmon says, okay, well, is the wrist injury bothering him? Can you tell mentally he's not only checked in? Is he kind of concerned about the offensive projection? Obviously, the offensive line wasn't playing well last year. Tua was kind of banged up. They transitioned the way that they played offense. But really, when it boils down to, for me, is that the 2 previous years in Miami were his 2 best years as a fantasy football wide receiver. Do we really like what are we willing to believe? Are we willing to believe he can get back to that level? And who knows? Maybe he's not 100% of the player that he can be in 2023. But even at 85% of that player, it's a steal at the 2-3 turn. Like he was arguably the first or second best player in fantasy football those years.
Yeah, you're getting an 18 to 20 point per game projection, even if he has lost a little bit of a step there. And the yards per route run, the receiving grade, some of the metrics do point to the fact that maybe he did have a bit of a fall off last year. And like you said, reception perception. And I want to go back and just watch the tape myself too, and see exactly what Tyreek Hill looked like on the plays where you got Tyler Huntley at quarterback or Skylar Thompson at quarterback. Like, was he still getting open? Was he still, making people miss in the open field and that kind of thing? But yeah, he was really banged up last year. Like I said, I'm just willing to flush it, man. I think in the early third round, it's all baked into the price and you're getting a really nice discount. We were getting Tyreek Hill 2 years ago going into the 2022 season, I believe, when he first got to Miami at the end of the second round. And he ended up being one of the best picks on the board in the first couple of rounds.
Yeah, there was a scenario a couple years ago going into 2022, you said, where having Tyreek Hill as your second or third drafted player eventually meant that you won your league. Now we have the opportunity to do that again.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's an absolute game breaker and we feel really good about him. And not to mention just from the underdog angle of it all, because these are, players we're drafting on Underdog. In week 17, they play the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Best Ball Mania 6. All the money is at the top in week 17. And that game could be absolute fireworks. And both of those teams have trouble playing in the cold. And guess what? That game's going to be in Florida. So both of those teams are going to be at home there.
Hey, both that game climate, both in terms of actual weather on top of what that projected over under would be in that game. Like, I wouldn't be at all shocked if that was the highest projected over under of the slate, highest projected game total of the slate. And when we're looking at it, both teams for Tampa Bay and Miami, their strength on defense, stopping the run. Their weakness on defense, against the pass. Would you at all be shocked if there was 80 pass attempts in that game?
No, I wouldn't. And Tyreek Hill's gone for 200 yards in a single quarter against Tampa Bay's defense before. So I know for a fact we have a hard time slowing him down. But anyways, first guy that you cannot stop drafting is who?
Hey, I guess we're back to 2017, 2018. You talked about Tyreek Hill. I'm going to talk about Davante Adams, because with Davante Adams, I'm just maybe not understanding the fact that we are drafting him right now where Cooper Kupp was going in 2024. And objectively speaking, 2025 Kupp is a much better player than 2024 Kupp was. I mean, you look at the reception perception. Cooper Kupp last year, I mean, he started off week one. We're like, oh my God, Puka Nacua got hurt. He had like an 18 target game or 16 target game or whatever it was. People were saying, like, is Cooper Kupp the wide receiver one rest of season? And as you see, the success rates versus each of those coverages, third percentile versus man, third percentile versus press, 30th percentile versus zone. Clear drop off from where prime 2021 Cooper Kupp was. When you look at Davante Adams, 80th percentile against man, 37th against zone, but he's a true X wide receiver, so I'm not really worried about that. And he's got that 89th percentile against press. Stylistically, I also think he's a better complement to Puka Nacua than what Cooper Kupp was. And on top of that, 2025 Matthew Stafford is the best quarterback Davante Adams has played with since 2021 Aaron Rodgers. And we just saw Davante Adams last year, despite sharing the field with a 154 target Garrett Wilson, be the wide receiver 9 in PPR points per game after splitting time with Vegas and New York. To me, when I'm looking at the profile of a extremely consolidated target share, the Cincinnatis of the world, what we expect Dallas to be, I think the Rams are right up there. I think when I'm looking at the context of this offense, yes, Puka Nacua is going to eat, but Davante Adams is the clear number 2/1B in this team. And I'm trusting a still very good wide receiver in an elite situation, tethered to Matthew Stafford and tethered to Sean McVay. Yes, I understand. Puka Nacua, I mean, Matt Harmon himself has said he has graduated to that tier 1 of NFL wide receiver. He's a guy I'd be willing to take in the top 8 of my PPR drafts. But like I said, he played next to Garrett Wilson last year, so we know he can play next to another alpha. And T. Higgins was just the wide receiver 5 in PPR points per game, playing next to the Triple Crown winner. If the offense is good enough, if we trust the situation enough, and the player itself is talented enough, why can't he post a top 12 level season? And you're getting that as a discount as the 31st overall player, I believe wide receiver 15 off the board right now on Underdog.
Yeah, I like me some Davante Adams as well. I will take the words out of Justin Jefferson's mouth. Respectfully, Garrett Wilson is not Puka Nacua.
You're right.
And I think I have Puka Nacua as my 7th overall player.
Puka Nacua is not Jamar Chase.
The argument, and I'm scarred from fading Justin Jefferson already, but I can make the argument he maybe belongs above Justin Jefferson, Puka Nacua. So I am more pro Puka Nacua, 30% target share. Davante Adams has like a 24% target share type of situation. again, like you said, I think it's going to be extremely consolidated. I think this offense is going to run through these two receivers. But I do prefer on the board, usually when I have to make this decision, it is usually between Tyreek Hill and Davante Adams. Maybe once you talk about Marvin Harrison versus Davante Adams, I think I'm more willing to go Davante Adams in that situation. But I just kind of like some of the other receivers on the board a little bit more than Davante Adams because I am a little bit higher on Puka Nacua than Adams, just relative to this offense. Plus, we know with Matthew Stafford, like he's kind of a kingmaker for his number one. And I do think Nacua has like 180 target, wide receiver one overall type of upside. Whereas I think Davante Adams, like you said, probably more in the wide receiver 7 to 12, I would say is the high end range of outcomes without a Puka Nacua injury. Obviously, he does have a little bit of baked in upside if Puka were to go down that he would probably dominate. But I like Adams. I just think he's a mid third round caliber of player, and I'm okay taking shots there.
Also, I was wrong. Wide receiver 19 and ADP on Underdog. Another one. On top of that, you mentioned Puka versus Garrett Wilson. Puka's light years better than Garrett Wilson, but Puka's not better than Jamar Chase. And we just saw T. Higgins get 18.5 points per game.
Yeah, but I think target earning ability, the way the offense runs, the way the offense funnels could result in the target discrepancy of Puka Nacua and Davante Adams being wider than the target discrepancy of like Jamar Chase versus T. Higgins or whatever. I think we could see 180 targets for Puka Nacua and only 130 for Davante Adams, which he would still pay off his ADP probably because he's still a great player. I just think that the ultimate ceiling probably requires a Puka Nacua injury.
Yeah, and if you're telling me if Puka stays healthy, you're still getting a wide receiver 7 through 12 ceiling for Davante Adams, I'm all for it. And on top of that, the implied upside if Puka were to go down, I mean, we talked about this with Jahmyr Gibbs in relation to Dave Montgomery, top 5 level projection at running back, but if Monty were to miss time, he'd be the 101 player. Where would Davante Adams rank if Puka were to miss any time? Because people were ready, like I said, to jump Cooper Kupp to a top 3 overall rest of season receiver last year.
Yeah, if Puka was ruled out for the year right now, I think you could argue Davante Adams is a first round pick.
Yeah. No, it goes to show. So the implied upside at wide receiver 19, you guys better be taking your Davante Adams and Tyreek Hill. I guess we're going to be labeled as the unks for liking these older wide receivers, but if they're this productive and this cheap, sign me up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love both of these players. Like, it's hard not to click the button on them, especially knowing that, like, let's say, I think the optimal way to start drafts this year, regardless really of pick, is going 1-1, one running back, one wide receiver, depending on, if you get a Bijan, if you get a Gibbs, if you get a Barkley at the top of the board, or maybe you're getting a Puka, or you're getting a Neighbors, or you're getting something at the bottom of the board. I like starting 1-1, going like Neighbors Achane or something like that. And being able to get one of these guys with your third pick seems pretty crazy to me. And being able to get this guy with your fourth pick seems even crazier to me, where Devonta Smith is going in the kind of late third, early fourth round. For a guy who's going off the board wide receiver 27, for him to be wide receiver 15, 20, and 14 the last 3 years in points per game doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me, because the Eagles have the highest projected win total in the NFL, defending Super Bowl champion, elite offensive line, stable quarterback, stable offensive projection. Even though they lost their offensive coordinator, we all expect them to be one of the best offenses in the league. The only concerns we have for Devonta Smith, have existed the last 3 years when he's been a top 20 receiver already. It's no different now than it was, because A.J. Brown was there the whole time. The pass volume has never been good. It was 32nd in the NFL, only 448 pass attempts last year, but it also was 21st and 23rd the 2 years prior to that. So it's not like the Eagles have ever really been pass heavy. The most pass attempts they've ever had was 560, and that was in 2023. And Devonta Smith was kind of banged up that year. He's been a top 20 guy without things breaking right for him, I guess is my whole point of this. AJ's only missed 2 games when Devonta Smith has been on the field. And in those 2 games, he had 17.75 PPR points. What if the Eagles go back to 525, 550 pass attempts? I'm not saying this is the projection. I'm saying it could happen. What if Barkley gets banged up? They run the ball less. Last year, they had a ton of positive game scripts. What happens if there's a lot more closer games and they can't just run it down people's throats? AJ missing time, Saquon missing time, Eagles defense playing poorly, whatever the case is, if the floor is what he's already done, then why is he not an excellent pick? And again, similar to Davante Adams, he has the implied upside that if AJ Brown does go down, he could end up winning people leagues. The fact that he was wide receiver 15 in points per game last year, when the Eagles threw the ball 448 times and he wasn't the alpha of his team, proves how good Devonta Smith is. And there was that large period of time during the regular season. I think we all forget this because of what happened in the playoffs. The Eagles' passing offense did not look good for about 7-8 games during the regular season.
Probably longer, to be honest. Their passing game as a whole kind of struggled. With that being said, though, I have him at 23. I have him ahead of ADP, even though I think this is going to be a predominant running team. Like you said, I don't even think his floor is wide receiver 27. Like, why is this ADP wide receiver 27, knowing inherently that Hurts is a 4th-round best ball pick, A.J. Brown is a 2nd-round best ball pick? Like, theoretically, you would think people would be targeting Devonta Smith higher for the stacking influence, but they're just not. And like you said, with Saquon Barkley, huge workload last year, 378 touches. You care to guess? So there's 10 running backs since, I believe, 2010 that have had 370 plus touches in the season. Care to guess how many of them were actually better the following season?
0. I know the answer is 0.
The answer is 0. So as good as Saquon Barkley is, it is a big workload. He is a 28-year-old running back going on 29. Doesn't catch a lot of passes. Like, if Saquon Barkley were to miss any time, like, why would they run a predominant run offense with Will Shipley? Why would they run a predominant run offense with A.J. Dillon? Like, to me, if Saquon Barkley missed any time, we would just see the pendulum switch.
Yeah, no, exactly. Dude, the Philadelphia Eagles had 3,100 passing yards last year. 3,100. And Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown combined for 2,000 of those while missing time, both of them.
Yep.
So that alone just tells me that, hey, the Eagles go back to close to a 4,000 pass attempt offense, get 26 touchdowns or whatever instead of 24 touchdowns like they got last year. Who's to say Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown can't both be wide receiver ones at the end of the season? Like, I do think it's very possible that even without an A.J. Brown injury, both of these guys are wide receiver ones because, like you kind of just made reference to, I kind of anticipate they won't be nearly as dominant in the second half of games where Saquon busts off a 70-yard touchdown and the game's just over and they're just running the clock out.
Division's only getting better as well. The Cowboys were hurt last year. The Washington Commanders, obviously rookie quarterback, they were good, don't get me wrong, but they were like a surprising playoff team. Yeah. They were a surprising playoff run. Like, people have expectations now for the division. So, like, are the Eagles just going to stomp around everybody in the division like they did last year pretty much?
No, probably not. And they also probably have other, out of division games that lined up very well for them
first place
last
schedule
year versus this year. I mean, the Giants started Drew Lock in both of the games that they played against them too. So I feel pretty confident that if you're drafting a player at his floor, he's a great pick. And Devonta Smith is being drafted at his floor right now. He should be, in my opinion, going wherever Marvin Harrison is going, which is like early to mid 3rd round. That's where he should be going. That's where he finishes, like that range of ADP, 15 to 20.
I'm not quite there, but also I can agree that where he's currently going, like, tell me the difference in projection between him and Terry McLaurin. And Terry McLaurin goes, what, 2 rounds before him?
Yeah, about a round and a half before him. I think it's the exact same projection. And I would actually prefer Smith straight up than Terry McLaurin. As much as I like Terry McLaurin this year, I think that I prefer Smith straight up.
Yeah, goes to show you. People remember all the touchdowns Terry McLaurin scored last year and forget the fact that he was very much overperforming in that aspect.
Yeah, not to mention, I don't think Deebo Samuel's cooked. I think he's going to factor into that passing game a lot more than Olamide Zaccheaus was last year, who was their number 2 receiver. Like, Noah Brown.
Zach Ertz was like their number 2 target. What if, like, again, this is maybe wish casting because I like the prospect. Like, what if Ben Sinnott actually has like a Trey McBride? Like, I don't think he's going to be the next Trey McBride, but like, it's easy to see the athletic 2nd-round pick from last year at tight end maybe even takes a step up.
I guess. I don't know. I don't think Ben Sinnott's
going to do a whole lot this year. It's Cope. I'm just playing the devil's advocate in regards to Terry.
Yeah, no, for sure. So moving into your number 2 player that you cannot stop drafting is who?
Yeah, my number 2 player, you mentioned where Devonta Smith should be. You said like a 3rd-round pick. This guy actually goes in the late 3rd, despite being a consensus top 5 pick last year. Yes, you heard that. Top 5 pick last year, coming off an RB2 season in his 2nd year as a pro. But because he was hurt last year and because the vibes were off with the Jets because of Aaron Rodgers, people just don't want to draft Breece Hall. If you guys don't want to draft Breece Hall, I will draft him and I will not stop drafting him because this is still the same projection. This is still the same upside case to why we were taking him as a top 5 pick in 2024. When you look at the potential workload, both in the receiving game and the rushing game for Breece Hall, and potentially contextualize the fact that he could be a fully healthy option this year, which he has actually revealed himself that the knee injury he suffered and played through last year was pretty serious. That was from Breece Hall himself. To me, I'm just not willing to write off the 24-year-old running back. Like, I understand it was not the year we wanted. I drafted him in the Flock League. Heck, I nicknamed him in the Flock League. Corey, I told you this. I nicknamed him in the Flock League Pussy Breath because I was so done with him last year. But this is a new year, man. He's healthy. He's got Tanner Engstrom now, which, by the way, that's another thing too. Moving off of Nathaniel Hackett, who didn't realize he was a receiving threat till midway through 2023, just goes to show you the level of incompetence the Jets had in the last couple of years. Now you bring in Justin Fields. Again, you guys can debate whether or not Justin Fields is a better quarterback at this point than Aaron Rodgers. And I don't really care if he is. But what I do know with Justin Fields is he's a whole lot more mobile than what a 41-year-old coming off of an Achilles tear Aaron Rodgers was. And on top of that, he's already acknowledged that Breece Hall has natural hands. Breece Hall is a guy I want to feed in the passing game. And you've heard that from Tanner Engstrom himself. This was a quote from Breece Hall when asked the difference with this offense under Tanner Engstrom. Was one of the first things he said was, I know Tanner likes to run the football, and said Engstrom himself knows Hall can be effective in the passing game. Really, when I'm looking at the overall case for Breece Hall, I can get what I believe to be a talented, efficient player that can get 200 carries, that can get 90 targets in the receiving game. Why are we able to get that at the end of the third, knowing the level of running back projections ahead of him don't quite have that type of upside?
It's funny because I did a video called The Safest Players in Fantasy Football last year, and I went round by round and said who were the safest picks in each round. The 2 picks in the first round were Breece Hall and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Breece Hall, what I said in that video exactly is what happened. I was like, the only way this guy fails is that the coaching staff, Aaron Rodgers, are a complete and utter abject disaster. So the vibes are completely thrown in the New York Jets situation. And unfortunately, that's exactly what happened. Everybody, like you guys listening to this, have all worked for a dickhead boss before. Did you want to work hard for that guy? Like, I think sometimes we forget the human element of football players. We just assume, oh, these guys are data points or whatever because we're playing fantasy. Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, all the stars on the New York Jets team, did they all have their worst seasons of their careers? They all did. Breece Hall did. Garrett Wilson did. You know, efficiency-wise, Sauce Gardner didn't have a great season either. Like, all of these guys, the vibes were so terrible. And I think just the very fact that Aaron Glenn is an adult in the building, they have Justin Fields, who has a good relationship with the number one receiver already, played with him in college. He's definitely not, a locker room cancer. Like if he was, that would have played out in Pittsburgh last year when he got benched. I think that Breece Hall is just, it was some of the injury stuff. It was the situation, the vibes, the offensive line was undergoing a big time shuffle as well. That's a little bit more of a continuity factor. The only real concern I have for Breece Hall is Braylon Allen, is Isaiah Davis going to factor in to the backfield a little bit more? And I just tend to think that we have a very large sample size of Breece Hall being a dominant workhorse. And as much as I think Braylon Allen's a decent handcuff, Isaiah Davis was a fun prospect that we both liked. I just don't envision those guys being a significant factor in the backfield. Could they take away 30% of the opportunities? Sure, but I think Breece Hall, even on a 70% opportunity share, is well within the range to finish as a top 4 to 8 fantasy running back this year. I don't know if he has an ultimately RB1 overall upside unless this offense really took a huge step.
So let me ask you this too. How many games do you think in the first 11 weeks? Because the reason why I say 11 weeks is it was reported he suffered his MCL sprain on the week 12 bye week. How many times in those first 11 weeks do you think Breece Hall failed to record a 70+% snap share?
Probably. I'm trying to think, is it going to be a lot or is it going to be a little? I would say he probably had a 70% snap share, a decent amount, like probably like half the time.
There was one game he didn't get 70+% of the snaps, and he was at 69%. After the bye, 62% against the Seahawks, didn't play against Miami, 48% against the Jaguars. He did have the game, obviously, against the Rams, 77%, but then 49% and 70%. All of his games of, partial usage, obviously ceding some touches to Braylon Allen, ceding some touches to Isaiah Davis. It happened after the bye week where it was reported he suffered a hyperextension and a grade 2 MCL sprain and rushed it back right away. So to me, like he said he had a pretty serious knee injury. It's clear he rushed it back. And based on his snap share, you would see the fact that all of his least snap games came after the bye week. On top of that, in those first 11 weeks, he was averaging 16.8 PPR points per game, despite the Jets being a complete and utter train wreck.
Yeah, and that's back end RB1, high end RB2 type of production, which is where he's being drafted right now. And again, that was, in a terrible situation. I tend to think that this whole, Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis are going to take away a lot of touches from him. It's going to get silenced the second that training camp is underway, the second preseason games are underway, and definitely by the time we get to the regular season. I get that the offensive coaching staff came from Detroit, where they used a lot of David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, but David Montgomery is a whole lot better than the running backs that are behind Breece Hall in the depth chart. Like, I don't even think that's debatable. Like, David Montgomery is way better than those guys.
So I've mentioned this before. The overall workload we saw from Bijan Robinson down the stretch last 12 weeks, where he scored 20 plus points in 10 of the last 12. His workload in that stretch, 75% of the snaps, 62% of the rushing attempts, 67% of the routes. Breece Hall's in the first 11 weeks of this year averaged 78% of the snaps, 68% of the rushing attempts, and 65% of the routes.
Yeah, he has to play better, which partially was because of the vibe situation. And I think Fields will help with that. I think the coaching staff will help with that. I think the offensive line continuity should help with that. So yeah, I mean, I feel good. Mason Taylor also was added in the draft. He's a good run blocking tight end. That should help out with the run game as well. So I feel really good about Breece Hall. He's definitely a guy that I'm clicking a lot of near that. If I have a late pick and I start my draft, Malik Neighbors, Devon Achane, and then, at the 311, Breece Hall's on the board for me there, I'm definitely clicking him 90% of the time, because Tyreek and Adams and those guys are usually off the board by that point in time on Underdog. And speaking of Underdog, you guys can start drafting some of the players that we're talking about over here. Promo code FSC, that'll be linked down below in the pinned comment. And all of our best ball rankings right now are up to date. So if you guys want to draft some teams, head on over to flockfantasy.com and use the code FSC there. And you can see all of our best ball rankings and get into some drafts there. So Chris Godwin is the guy that I'm going to talk about here as my next player. He's going off the board about a mid-6th round pick. Danny, do you know how many wide receivers outscored Chris Godwin when he was on the field last year? Yeah, one. And it was by 0.3 points, and it was Jamar Chase, who had the best season of any wide receiver in fantasy. So, I mean, Chris Godwin was so dominant last year, and that was with a healthy Mike Evans on the field. Like, Emeka Egbuka is going to be great. Like, I have no doubt in my mind he's going to be a great receiver. But realistically, Chris Godwin will be the funnel for this offense. He has been anytime he's been on the field. And the reason Godwin is going this low in the mid-6th round, 64th overall ADP, is because of the injury. And my thing with Chris Godwin is why I'm not overly concerned about the injury is, number one, the timeline for a dislocated ankle is, relatively speaking, about a 9 to 10 month injury, which is when he's scheduled to come back in time for training camp, in time for week 1. If you guys want to wait to draft him until training camp to see what he's doing, to see if he's going to be on the PUP list, that kind of thing, that's totally fine. But the dude posted a top 15 season in PPR points per game, 8 months removed from an ACL tear, a multi-ligament contact ACL tear, in a season where Tom Brady was bad as well in 2022. The dude's first words out of his mouth, if you look at the broadcast of when he got taken out on the cart during that Ravens game where he dislocated his ankle, he looks at his trainer and he says, "Time to get to work." That is Chris Godwin's attitude. That is Chris Godwin's mindset. The Bucs have a top 5 offensive line. The pass volume, I expected to go up. We were surprisingly like a bottom 10, bottom 12 pass rate in neutral situation type of offense. Josh Grizzard takes over as the offensive play caller. He was our third down play caller last year, and we were number 1 in the NFL converting third downs through the passing game. Mayfield's going as a top 6 to 8 quarterback in ADP. Godwin is absolutely, without the injury, he'd be a 2nd round pick, probably. If he had played the whole season and produced like he did last year, he would have been a 2nd round pick. Yeah. And you're getting him in the 6th round because he could start a little bit slow coming off of the injury. Deepak Sports MD Analysis over on Twitter says that there's some skepticism a little bit on the reporting. Most ankles dislocate with a fracture. And he said, if so, the data projects him playing week 1, but probably 90% until about week 8, until the injury is fully ready to go. But to me, Chris Godwin already broke the timelines of the ACL tear, a multi-ligament ACL tear. Like we're talking Brandon Ayuk not even going to be on the field 12 months after his injury. And Chris Godwin produced a top 15 season 8 months after the injury.
He could be 90% of the player that was the wide receiver 2 in points per game before he got hurt and still be an incredible value at wide receiver 34 off the board right now.
Yeah, he's going way, like, you're at a point where you probably already have 3 to 4 wide receivers on your
36
roster.
Wide receiver 36.
You have 3 to 4 wide receivers on your roster already at that point. Like, I feel very confident taking that dive on him because, again, I know that the Buccaneers offense is going to throw the ball. I know they're going to be efficient through the air. I expect, them to have like a very, very good second half of the season. And as we said for Tyreek Hill, that's also the reason I'm drafting Godwin in part is because on Underdog in Best Ball Mania, you kind of want to correlate week 17 a little bit. So I take Tyreek Hill a lot. And in turn, I take Chris Godwin a lot too, because I want to correlate the two for that week 17 correlation. But yeah, I feel so good about Godwin going where he's going. And yeah, the injury's, a concern, but it is completely baked into his price at this point. The 6th round, if he was going in the 4th round, I'd say the injury is probably baked into his price.
You want to know the best part as well about taking Godwin specifically on Underdog?
What?
What did we mention with the Tyreek Hill bit?
Yeah, in half PPR and week 17 is where all the money is. Like they play the Dolphins in week 17, and that's where all the money is at the top. And not to mention, too, like let's say 5 weeks into the season, Chris Godwin doesn't really look like himself. Well, those are the least important 5 weeks of the season for your home redraft leagues, because if you can trust your drafting ability, you can make up for that in other areas. But definitely in Best Ball Mania, if you can advance Chris Godwin, he's healthy at the end of the season, that's what you're looking for, where all that money is at the top in those contests.
Hey, Bush, he could literally have 0 points of production before the Best Ball playoffs. But if you're able to sneak him in and he's a top 15 wide receiver for the Best Ball playoffs, that's already basically paying off a 7th or 8th round pick you take him with, or 7th round pick where he goes.
Yeah, dude, like Jameson Williams goes in the 4th round, and Jameson Williams' thesis is that he's a 1 week. If you get him to week 17, he can blow up. But like we all agree that Chris Godwin's going to be a much better overall season-long pick than Jameson Williams, despite them going 2 rounds after Jameson Williams.
On top of that, too, you mentioned with Grizzard taking over as the passing game coordinator, what is the one thing we said, oh, maybe the Bucs will miss with Liam Cohen leaving?
The run game. The run game. I think that Irving and Rashad are going to be the guys that suffer from Liam Cohen leaving, as opposed to the passing game, especially when you add a first-round receiver as good as Emeka Egbuka was. And Evans missed a lot of time last year. McMillan was a rookie he looked like a rookie until about week 11, week 12. So I really do think that this passing game is just going to be really, really good. And Godwin is the engine of it, and he's going to play that big slot role like he always has.
Yeah, I've been drafting a lot of Godwin as well. It's funny because I'm not drafting a ton of Devonta Smith maybe compared to you, but I'm drafting a lot more compared to maybe where the market is at on him. But you guys are going to notice like a lot of these players like are overlapping we both like them because they're great picks on the board.
I intend to have we're going to have big portfolios as far as how many teams we've drafted on Underdog. Yeah. I intend to have 30% of Devonta Smith and Chris Godwin because I believe they are a round to 2 rounds underpriced.
Yeah, which makes total sense. And speaking of guys that are maybe a round or 2 rounds underpriced, based on their current ADP, Kittle's ADP case right now, George Kittle, 48.4 ADP, late 4th, might be the most outrageous thing I've seen on Underdog right now. You mean to tell me that you can draft arguably the best tight end talent in the NFL, and I actually don't even think it's an argument. I think he is the best tight end in the NFL, on an offense that we like, Kyle Shanahan, Brock Purdy, we like the 49ers, coming off a literal tight end 1 point per game finish, and he's going 2 full rounds after the tight end 2 off the board. Trey McBride's ADP, 24. George Kittle's ADP, 48. You could very well make the case that in 2025, George Kittle outscores Trey McBride. In fact, I know you have it ranked that way. So for me, because I already view it as a toss-up, why would I take McBride at 24 if I can get George Kittle 24 picks cheaper? And look, I like Bowers and McBride. Like, I'm not going to have 0% exposure to those guys because I think they're good players and I don't want to have 0 of them. But when I'm comparing the opportunity bundles, look at it. Round 2, RB or wide receiver. Maybe in the 2nd round, you're looking at Bowers versus, let's look at the running backs and receivers in that range. Devon A-Chan, Drake London, Derrick Henry, A.J. Brown, Ladd McConkey. Those are the guys that Trey McBride and Brock Bowers are going around. Who's going around George Kittle? Now we get to DK Metcalf, Cortland Sutton, George Pickens. I love Omari and Hampton, but Omari and Hampton, like, when you're comparing the opportunity bundles of Kittle plus one of those round 2 flex players or one of those 2 tight ends plus one of the round 4 flex players, the decision's easy to me.
Yeah, I have Kittle ranked over McBride straight up. My thought process is like, a lot of people are out on Ayuk, obviously, because of the double ACL tear. Debo's gone. Christian McCaffrey's a contentious topic because of the injury as well. There's Ricky Pearsall stands out there. There's Jawan Jennings stands out there. But like all signs just point to George Kittle being dominant to me. And George Kittle was the tight end 1 in points per game last year. And the 49ers won 6 games. Like he already outscored Brock Bowers and Trey McBride a year ago.
He's been a top 3 tight end in PPR points per game in 6 of his last 7 years. So, for sure, 6 of his last 7 years, he's at least paid off his current ADP, which years he's had been the tight end 1, years he's been the tight end 2. And this is by far the least target competition he's had, like you said. In that stretch, top 3 tight end 6 to 7 years. In that stretch as well, Deebo Samuel had a 1,400-yard year. Brandon Ayuk had a 1,300 year. Deebo Samuel's gone. Brandon Ayuk's recovering from an ACL. And I could very well make the case that with Kittle, if he gets back to the potential target volume he saw 2020 and before, he hasn't crossed 7 targets per game since 2020. Earlier career Kittle, 2018, 2019, he was like a 7.5, 8.5 target per game player. If we see him get back up to that type of volume because they simply don't have the target competition that he had in his prime, dude, you give Kittle 8 targets per game on how efficient he's already been on 6.3, 6.5 targets per game every year. Dog, like can he average 17 points per game, 18 points per game?
Dude, the only year, you said 6 of his last 7 years, he's been a top 3 tight end per game. The only year that he didn't, Christian McCaffrey had a legendary season. Deebo Samuel was a wide receiver 1 in fantasy, and Brandon Ayuk was a second-team All-Pro. That was what it take for Kittle to not be a top 3 tight end. He had to have like dominant players around him for that to happen. Ayuk is coming off of an injury. Deebo's no longer there, and Christian McCaffrey may not be the same player.
Yeah, it goes to show, man, like maybe people are bored of George Kittle. Maybe people say, oh, he's 31, the decline's happening soon. Well, if the decline was happening soon, why did we take Travis Kelce at the end of the third last year? Why did we take Travis Kelce at the age George Kittle is right now, by the way, in the first round, second round of our drafts?
Yeah, no, dude, it's completely insane to me that like wherever McBride's going, like you want to prefer McBride because of the youth and the injury factor, sure.
It's fine.
Wherever he's going, Kittle should be the next pick off the board or very close to it. Like I have them 31 and 32, and that is 18, 19 picks ahead of George Kittle's ADP, and then 5 or 7 picks lower than Trey McBride's ADP. I think the fact that Kittle exists and is a similar projection means that McBride should be going lower. And to be honest, the only reason he isn't is because Jamar Chase goes at first overall, and people week 17 correlate to the Cardinals game. And that's why McBride goes 24.
Yeah. I don't think the issue specifically is with McBride going 24. It's with Kittle going where he's going. And because Kittle's so low, it makes McBride at 24 a bad pick inherently. If it was McBride's ADP was 24 and Kittle's was 30, sure, go take as much McBride as you want if you prefer him straight up. But just the fact of the matter that there's a 2-round discrepancy makes literally 0 sense.
No, it makes absolutely no sense. And this is an ADP that I'm not going to sit here and tell you that this player is going to win your league. But I think he is a vital piece to your roster, whether it's in a managed redraft league and you go light at running back, or whether it's he gives you weeks in best ball. I think Brian Robinson's one of my favorite clicks on the board, and I've drafted him a lot, like 25, 30% of the time. He's one of my highest drafted running backs because in the mid 8th round at 89 overall ADP, he finished RB 28 in points per game last year, RB 22 in 2023. And so much went wrong from him for like a injury perspective. And we all believe in this offense. Like the Commanders are expected to be a very good team, and nothing's been added to this backfield. They still have Austin Eckler, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, who was a 7th round pick, barely an NFL draft selection. He was RB 17 in points per game before he started suffering injuries in week 5 last year. Week 1, he had knee soreness going into the first game. Week 4, he eventually had a knee injury, missed 1 game, was on 3 injury reports after that. Week 8, he had a hamstring pull, 2 missed games, 2 injury reports. Like his game logs are littered with a 20% snap share game. If this dude can avoid ticky-tack injuries this year, we're looking at the goal line back, a 12 to 15 touchdown upside running back for one of the best offenses in football. And he's roughly, when he's been on the field the last couple of years in way worse offenses in 2023 and then in 2024 when he was banged up, a 13 to 14 PPR point per game guy when he's been on the field. He was RB 11 the first 11 weeks of 2023 before he started getting banged up. He is the perfect 3rd running back for your redraft roster, 3rd running back in best ball, who you can get after hammering 4 straight wide receivers, 5 straight wide receivers in the mid rounds.
It's pretty easy to me because I've actually been drafting him too. And like, it's not that I'm enamored with B-Rob, the player. It's just the current climate on Underdog. If you wait 1 more round, the best running back available is Cam Scatterbo / Travis Etienne. That's what you're dealing with. So for me, Brian Robinson almost feels like the tier cutoff because at that point, Pacheco is going to be off the board. I mentioned, some of the rookies here.
Jones and Pollard go around that range as well.
Yeah, like Brian Robinson currently, like you said, he's going here as the 30th overall running back. You want to know what running backs 31 to 35 or 36 are respectively?
Who?
Jordan Mason, Jalen Warren, Cam Scatterbo, Tyrone Tracy, Najee Harris, and Travis Etienne at 36. All those guys
all committees.
All committees are clear handcuffs.
Yeah, and like with Scatterbo, Tracy, with Etienne, Tootin, those guys, you're hoping somebody emerges. But at the same time, we have no real idea of who that's going to be at this point in time. Like very confident that Brian Robinson is going to carry, if he's healthy, he's going to carry the ball 250 times.
So I'll tell you this. The rule of thumb I've made myself for drafts right now on Underdog is in the first 8 rounds, I allow myself one max onesie. You want to take a tight end like Kittle, you want to take a McBride, Bowers, sure, be my guess. You want to take one of the quarterbacks, sure, be my guess. But goddamn, I do not want to leave the 8th round with less than 7 running back or wide receivers combined. And B-Rob, to me, is like you said, you grab him as your 3rd running back. You have 4 wide receivers and maybe 1 onesie, or maybe you have a 4-4 build through 8 rounds. Like, to me, that is optimal because, like I said, rounds 9 to 13 is where I want to draft more onesies when I'm looking at Cam Scatterbo versus Tyler Warren, which you'll talk about in a second.
Yeah, and actually Warren goes about a round and a half after him. It's so hard for me not to walk out of the first 8 rounds with the same build every time, which is 5 wide receivers, 3 running backs, because it's just so easy to deviate for a couple good running back swings and then just continue hammering wide receivers, knowing that what would you rather have? Would you rather have Dak Prescott, Brock Purdy as your quarterback core with a absolutely loaded running back and wide receiver core? Or would I rather deviate for Jalen Hurts and Brock Bowers and have, Trey Harris as my wide receiver 4 or 5.
Rashid Shaheed as your fucking wide receiver 4.
It's hard to do. And again, this is a unique to Underdog. It'll probably be less of an issue in your home leagues, but I do think it will spill over to home leagues as well, where you're going to like your teams a lot more. Like if you guys are doing mock drafts on Flock Fantasy right now, if you're doing mock drafts on Sleeper or whatever platform you're playing on, you probably like your teams a little bit more if you're in a 2 wide receiver, 2 flex, 2 running back, 1 tight end, 1 quarterback type of league, where you do draft a lot of running backs and wide receivers at the beginning of your draft, and you wait till round 9 to grab David Njoku, wait till round 11 to grab, Bo Nix or Dak Prescott or CJ Stroud or Jordan Love or something like that. Like, to me, the teams just come out way, way better, which is why a lot of the guys that I'm drafting are late round quarterbacks, late round tight ends.
Exactly. And I mean, speaking of that range, we can go on to my guy, because my guy is going in the early 7th. And when you compare, like, Joe Burrow goes before him, Sam Laporta goes before him, like, to me, instead of just taking a onesie like one of those guys, why not take the upside on Quinshon Judkins as the 24th running back off the board, 73.6 ADP? And we'll talk about your love for Judkins as a prospect in the Dynasty season in a second, because obviously you were a big Judkins guy yourself. But to me, it's such a clear-cut situation for him. His main competition for touches right away is a fellow rookie, Dylan Sampson, who I like as a sleeper. But when we compare the opportunity cost in terms of their where they were drafted, 36th overall is a big difference than a day 3 pick. So initially, right off the bat, if your main concern for Judkins is Dylan Sampson, the history will tell you that's not the biggest concern that you could possibly have for a top 40 selected running back. And in fact, when you look at the similar profiles of running backs drafted in his range that had, like I said, similar prospect profiles, we go through it. Breece Hall, Dalvin Cook, Kenneth Walker, DeAndre Swift, Derrick Henry, Jonathan Brooks, and Nick Chubb as per the prospect model. Breece Hall, 16.4 PPR points per game before his ACL tear. Dalvin Cook, 16.4 PPR points per game prior to his ACL tear. Kenneth Walker, 13.5 PPR points per game in his rookie season. DeAndre Swift, 14.6. Nick Chubb, 12.2. And Derrick Henry was the only outlier, I would say, out of this, because he did play behind DeMarco Murray in his rookie season. If you took those PPR point per game averages of each of those running backs I listed, RB13, RB13, RB21, RB19, and for Nick Chubb specifically, like I said, 12.2 and then 16.5 once he earned the full workload week 7 on, was the RB25 across the year and the RB12 in that split week 7 on. That's where they would have ranked in 2024. Yet you're getting Judkins as the RB24 off the board in 2025. I get it. The Browns offense is a question mark at this point. But if Judkins is the talent we believe, it won't matter. We know that the Browns want to run the football. We know Stefanski wants a lead bell cow running back. And when you're getting an elite athlete with 220 plus pound size and top 40 draft capital, like, to me, in a range where you're seeing dead zone older running backs being drafted, take the upside on the guy who's literally being drafted at his floor right now.
Yeah, no, it's such a cut and dry case for me. Like, we're borderline certain that Quinshon Judkins is a good player because he's been in our lives in the Dynasty community since his true freshman week 1 season. Yeah. Like, legitimately, the second he stepped on a college football field, he was one of the best college football running backs in the country. Him and his college teammate, both Travion Henderson, we're just certain basically that they're great running back prospects. So the fact that you got a guy getting the draft capital, has the athleticism, there is touches very much available. Like, Jerome Ford, if anybody's scared of Jerome Ford, like, I don't know what to tell you. The guy is completely a replacement level running back, and at best is like the 50th best running back in the NFL, 40th best running back in the NFL. And again, I think my highest drafted running back is Dylan Sampson, like overall in the drafts that have finished for me. But it's because he's like a 19th or like an 18th round pick. I'm taking the shot on Dylan Sampson, obviously, but with Quinshon Judkins going off the board, I have him RB19, and I have him in a tier with Kenneth Walker, with Amari and Hampton. And I can make the argument through the first 5-6 games of the year that I bet you he outscores Amari and Hampton, because I think Najee Harris will probably be a pest early on.
Yeah, he very well could. And I agree with what you're saying. I have him at RB19 as well, in that range with Walker, Kamara, Johnson, just behind Mixon. And honestly, now that I'm thinking, I would take Judkins over Mixon. I'm making that change right now.
I moved Mixon down after the Chubb signing.
Yeah.
So
I just moved him down as well.
I have Isaiah Pacheco ahead of Joe Mixon.
Really? Where do you have Joe Mixon then?
I have Mixon at 23.
Okay. So you have Pacheco a little bit more aggressive 22 than I do, which it was fair. I have him at 27.
But I have Mixon now in the tier with Pacheco, Swift, Brian Robinson, Aaron Jones, James Conner. Like, I think that they're all pretty comparable, like a lot of older veteran guys getting good workloads. We have some maybe question marks about the talent. They would be prototypical dead zone running backs who in really, really running back heavy home leagues will go in like the 4th, 5th round. But you and I can get them in the 7th round plus, because we play in leagues that people don't value running backs like that. So yeah, if you're wondering who the dead zone running backs are this year, it's probably Pacheco, Mixon, DeAndre Swift, Brian Robinson, Aaron Jones, James Conner. The problem is the dead zone those are only dead zone running backs if they're 3rd, 4th, 5th rounders. And if they're going in the 7th, 8th, 9th round, they're not dead zone guys anymore.
Yep, I would agree. But instead of drafting those older guys with maybe injury concerns, I can't rationalize how we can get so excited about youth and fantasy football and let a guy be drafted at his floor when he's a rookie.
Yeah, no, I can't do it. I can't do it. I'm drafting Quinshon Judkins like crazy as well. Speaking of rookies and a guy that I'm drafting like crazy, I have Tyler Warren, who is easily my highest drafted tight end right now. Like, it's not even close. I think I have him like 15% higher. I have him like 45% of my team so far that have finished up. The reason for that is like, well, first of all, we just saw a top 15 pick tight end break fantasy football in Brock Bowers, and Tyler Warren was selected 14th overall in the NFL draft. Do you want me to read you the Colts depth chart at tight end?
Mo Alley Cox, fucking
Drew Ogletree, Jelani Woods, and Will Mallory. Those are the tight ends that were on the roster.
Oh, Jelani Woods was the dynasty darling because he was like 6'7" and ran pretty fast, right?
He was like a 10.0 RAS score. I'm pretty sure he was like the most athletic tight end in history. But dude,
the real question.
We just saw a late round tight end break fantasy football who was a top 15 NFL draft pick. And yet, like, I fully expected Tyler Warren to be a 6th round redraft pick. I fully expected it. He's 11th round redraft pick right now on Underdog, the sharpest platform, the sharpest ADP that you can find. In your home leagues, I bet you he goes lower than that, 13th, 14th round. He is a lock for 80% of the routes out the gate. Week 1, all 8 guys that you guys can see here that had 80% of the routes: McBride, Kelsey, Otten, Bowers, Tucker Kraft, Evan Ingram, Sam Laporta, and Hunter Henry last year. All 8 of those guys were over 80% of the routes. The only the only tight ends in football over 80%. They were all top 15 tight ends in points per game. Even the middling talents like Hunter Henry and Evan Ingram and Cade Otten, who are not very good, but they just got the routes, so they were still producing at the point that they're producing at. Daniel Jones is going to start. Like, we all know this now. Like, I mean, Anthony Richardson's dealing with a shoulder injury. I think this passing offense will be a lot better than people think. This is an outrageous statistic, in my opinion. The Colts, as an offense, were the 10th scoring offense in 2023 and the 17th scoring offense in 2024, a league average offense, because Shane Steichen's a great coach, with Anthony Richardson as a rookie and a second-year player who had, I believe the record is he had the lowest completion percentage of over 250 attempts since Tim Tebow and Achilles Smith. And Gardner Minshew started most of 2023, and Joe Flacco started the remaining games in 2024. Then the Colts were a top 17 offense in both seasons. Daniel Jones is a much better quarterback than those guys. I know he's not excellent, but he is just as good as Sam Darnold. He's just as good as some of these guys that can lead good offenses when the pieces around them are good. He led the NFL in accuracy rate in 2022, with his leading receivers being Richie James and Darius Slayton that year.
So the funny thing too is, like, again, I'm not saying it's a certain that Daniel Jones is going to start. Even if it's Anthony Richardson, though, guess what? Daniel Jones is a much bigger piece to turn to than anything that Anthony Richardson has had before. So either Anthony Richardson is going to play the best football of his career, or it will be Daniel Jones. Regardless, though, it's either Anthony Richardson at his best, which is good for Tyler Warren, or it's Daniel Jones, which is better than Gardner Minshew, which is better than any of the quarterback options instead of Anthony Richardson that they've had before. And like you said, Mo Alley Cox is his biggest piece of competition, I would say, in the tight end room right now. And he's most known for a meme than he is for being a good football player. Like, the real question is Austin Hooper or Mo Alley Cox?
Yeah, no, like they're I don't know where
you know the meme, right? You
no,
don't know
I
the
do
meme?
not.
Oh, okay. The comment section will know the meme, but yeah.
Anyways, Tyler Warren, first of all, I could have picked any Indianapolis Colt because they're high on my list. I could have picked the quarterback, Daniel Jones. I could have picked Alec Pierce. I could have picked Adonai Mitchell. I could have picked Josh Downs, who we're going to talk about in a second. I could have picked Michael Pittman. I have drafted so many Colts. And the reason for that is because I think this is going to be the offense, the Vikings 2024 offense, the offense that breaks out and has a great season and produces good fantasy assets. And the reason that Warren is my highest drafted is because he plays the position that is hard to find players. And he was also, of all the players in this offense, the highest investment from the team.
Funny enough, the only Colt I'm not drafting much of is Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah. And I probably should draft more Jonathan Taylor, to be honest, because I'm high on the offense overall.
Fair. Regardless, though, we go on to another Colt. You mentioned it, Josh Downs. He is currently going off the board as a mid-8th round pick in a wide receiver piss boy climate. Like, we're talking about the fact that any wide receiver with a pulse goes early on Underdog, and yet the one that is a legit year 3 breakout candidate with the separation metrics, 90th percentile against man, 92nd against zone, 82nd against press, knowing that the climate loves wide receiver, how is he not going higher? Like, can you tell me that with a straight face, that given how much people thirst for wide receivers on Underdog, this guy's a mid-8th round pick with an 87th overall ADP. Like I said, I'm not ready to anoint Daniel Jones as a guaranteed starter yet, but it's pretty simple to me. Either it's the best Anthony Richardson has ever looked, or it will be Daniel Jones. Regardless of that situation, Josh Downs is set to see a quarterback improvement in 2025 that he saw in 2024. Really, when it comes down to, for me, when a year 2 player shows this level of talent at separating and he is this cheap, I'm going to own him everywhere. Not to mention, one of my favorite stacks early on is Brian Thomas Jr., Travis Hunter. Love building through the Jaguars. You know who they play in week 17?
Hold on.
It's obvious. So who are we talking about?
Yeah, the Jaguars. Yeah, the Jaguars.
Yeah, the Jaguars play the Colts.
Yeah.
Dude,
I tweet out Josh Downs propaganda once a day, it feels like. Yeah. Dude, Wan'Dale Robinson, 143 targets last year with Daniel. And when Daniel Jones was the starting quarterback, he was pacing 143 targets as well. Like he was peppered. Slot receiver for Daniel Jones is probably going to get peppered again. And Josh Downs, like reception perception numbers, like you said, they're absurdly good. Like 90th percentile against man coverage for a 171-pound, 5'9" receiver.
Per Harmon, like word for word in that article, he's got the upside to be that slot receiver that offenses build their offense around, like an Amon or St. Brown. Is what
he's like Tyler Lockett on crack, man. Like, I don't know why. I have no idea why he's not like a 5th or a 6th round pick. Like, here's the receivers I have him ranked around, and like you're gonna get mad at some of these. Like, I have him ranked over Xavier Worthy.
Yeah, again, I have him pretty aggressively ranked. I have him ranked as my wide receiver 32, and like I said, he's a lot cheaper on Underdog. But that just goes
I have him over Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton, dude.
I can't get there, but what I can get is the fact that he's going off the board currently. Where? Wide receiver 48. Wide receiver 48 off the board. I have him at 32, and it's still less than what you have him.
Dude, he's such a easy click, man. It's so hard not to draft him every single draft because I can't stop. I literally can't stop drafting Josh Downs because it's so hard not to click him. He's the perfect wide receiver 5. Once you're in that 7th, 8th round area when he's on the board, and you already have, let's say, Drake London, Tyreek Hill, Zay Flowers, Chris Godwin as your first 4 receivers. It's like, yeah, why would I not tack on a Josh Downs to that receiver core? And now I don't have to spend very much investment in receiver at all for the rest of the draft because I have those 5 guys who are going to make up the majority of the 3 weeks I need.
Yeah, exactly. When it comes down to it, the Colts offense, like I said, is one I'm targeting specifically because I'm already drafting Jaguars. So why would I take the guy that could lead the team in targets in the 8th round? In the 8th round, and not to mention can lead the team in targets, I would probably place him as the number 1 bet too.
Yeah, and it's not even like I don't like Pittman like I'm actually drafting all of them. Like I think they're all so appropriately priced that even if Josh Downs, who basically was a top 20 receiver when healthy last year in PPR points per game, even if he is like the best receiver on the team, I still think we could get a top 6 season out of Tyler Warren at the same time. I still think you can get a wide receiver 3 season out of Michael Pittman at the same time. Like I think they're all extremely good values.
Yeah, and that is why we cannot stop drafting these 10 players.
Yeah, and I mean, the Indianapolis Colts, you guys probably knew that was coming because every time we do a best ball draft, we're like, I guess we'll just backdoor Daniel Jones as our third quarterback because like we just can't we're always having Colts and Jaguars on our team, so it just makes sense to do it at that point. Like, there's a couple guys that just missed the list for me. Like, I had quite a bit of exposure to some late round guys, but I didn't want to talk about late round guys. I figured it made more sense to talk about earlier round guys. And there's some guys that I just talk about nonstop that I didn't want to talk about. Like Devon Achane, I talk about all the time. He is one of my highest drafted early round guys.
Yeah, sure. Could I have included CeeDee Lamb in this video? Of course I could have. Did you guys really want to hear another CeeDee Lamb rant? No, you didn't. Did you guys want to hear another Travis Hunter rant? No, you didn't. You guys want to hear another David Njoku rant? No, you didn't. You guys already know that I'm drafting those guys. I didn't have to hash it out again in this video.
Yeah, like I'm looking at some of my exposures briefly, the guys that I talk about all the time. Like, yeah, I talk about Brandon Ayuk a lot, and I've drafted a lot of him just mainly for the thesis of Best Ball Mania. I think in redraft leagues, he's less appealing, but because of the, if he's healthy week 10 to 17, he could win somebody the tournament. That's why I'm drafting him. Judy was a guy that nearly made the list for you as well. I have him on 30% of the drafts that have finished up for me as well. You mentioned Breece Hall. I've drafted a ton of him. Tyrone Tracy, I've drafted a shit ton of too as well, because I do think the way that I like to build out teams, I'm usually looking for an early season hammer at that point in the draft, like whether it's Brian Robinson, who we talked about in this video, or a guy like Tyrone Tracy. And the reason for that is because I usually have like Quinshon Judkins, Amarian Hampton, or Trevion Henderson on my team already. So I feel like I need to draft a guy who's going to get me points early in the year, and Tracy kind of profiles as that.
Yeah, to me, like Tyrone Tracy was an efficient rookie running back behind a depleted offensive line last year. Like, I get Scadaboo was added, but like Tyrone Tracy is just so much more dynamic and has the stranglehold on third down work.
Yeah, and like Scadaboo is a great prospect, and you guys know in the dynasty, lens, I really like Scadaboo. But like, I wouldn't be shocked if Tracy's like an RB2 or better for the majority of the year, and then maybe by the end of the season, it starts to go towards Scadaboo. Like, from a redraft 1 season sample size perspective, I actually prefer Tracy from a redraft standpoint.
Is it just Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery wish version?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, it's not going to be nearly as good of an offense, but I think that Tracy could end up carving out a nice third down role and even being clearly the lead back early on in the season until Scadaboo gets his bearings under him.
For sure. But regardless, they're cheap enough. And like I said, could have talked about a bunch of other players on this video, but ultimately there are just some players that you guys hear us talk about on literally every live stream and literally every video.
Yeah, and the other early round guy that I was going to mention was AJ Brown. I have him on like 25% of my teams too. I've just been anytime I got a mid to late second round pick, like he just seems like the best click on the board to me. Like I might be on an island here, but I'd rather have AJ Brown than Ladd McConkey still. Like I know some people are like, hey, McConkey, number 1 receiver, break.
Where do you have Saquon ranked?
Where do I have Saquon ranked? Third overall.
Okay, you might have to move him down a little bit if you're very high on these pass catchers then.
I mean, maybe, but those 3 players are going to get all the fantasy points in one of the best offenses in football.
Give me CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, well, we all knew that was coming. So appreciate you guys for tuning in. This was 10 players we cannot stop drafting. If you guys want to start drafting some of these players yourselves and you heard some of these ADPs and you're like, holy crap, Devonta Smith's a 5th round pick or whatever, head on over to Underdog Fantasy. Use the promo code FSE. When you sign up, you'll get up to $1,000 in bonus funds to play with. And you'll also get a gimme pick. If you guys are, watching the NHL finals, NBA finals, you can use that gimme pick right away, or you can save it for the NFL season. And if you want all of our best ball rankings, and then, our tools, our trade calculator, my teams feature are also usable for redraft as well. So once you get into the redraft season, I'm sure those things will become very useful to you guys. And you can head on over to flockfantasy.com, use the promo code FSE to sign up for a 7-day free trial, 30% off any of the packages. Of course, annual Mother Flockers who sign up with our code will also, I believe we're dropping this on Saturday. Tomorrow is when our Devi startup is going to close. So if you guys want to get into that Devi league, obviously this is not a Devi or a Dynasty video, but if you guys want to get into that Devi league, head on over to the link in the description to fill out that Google form, because we will be drawing names for that tomorrow. And annual Mother Flockers who use code FSE will have 5 times the chances over free entrants to get into that league. So definitely check that out if you guys are interested. Like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed. But with that being said, peace out. We'll talk to you soon.